Hello everyone, and welcome to How to Request, Import, and Normalize Data for a Variety of Accounting Packages. My name is Jim Kaplan, founder of AuditNet, and with us today is my colleague and friend Rich Lanza, an audit software expert. This webinar represents a collaboration between AuditNet and auditsoftware.net in delivering training series focusing on audit software. We're glad you could join us. I'll be moderating today's webinar. A little bit about myself for those of you who don't know me. The slides were sent out this morning. You can read it on the slide. I'm not going to go into any more detail than that. The next slide does provide you with some information about AuditNet. Please take the time to review that slide in your packet. And before we proceed to today's material and introducing Rich Lanza, I would like to go through a few important housekeeping points. So let me just cover these briefly. The webinar is being recorded, and you will receive a copy of the recording. NASBA rules do require us to ask polling questions during the webinar, and CPE certificates will be sent via email to those who answer all the polling questions. If you're joining us from a tablet device today, you may not be able to answer the polling questions, in which case you'll have to accumulate your answers and send them to myself or Rich in a single email. We'll record them in our records, and you will receive your CPE certificate. Additionally, if you joined us today via a survey, you did receive a copy of the slides. However, you did not receive the handouts. The other handouts and data files that are being used today are available for purchase. So those of you who joined us from a survey, you do have the option of doing that. The next slide provides some information about disclaimers. Again, I'm not going to go into any detail about that. In order to provide Rich with the maximum amount of time, I'd like to turn the floor over to Rich Lanza right now. Rich?
Okay, thanks a lot, Jim, and thanks everyone for coming today. I have spent a lot of my time, most of my time, doing data importing. So of all my career, of the 20 years plus, I would say probably about 50 to 70% of that was, just normalizing data files. And that's what we're going to talk about today. So I have a pretty packed learning agenda and what we'll go through in going through the slides, and we will get to everything today, but do note we have close to 90 slides and about 100 minutes, and I do want to show a lot of demos as well. Now, in the learning objectives, the main thing we're going to do is start out by talking about how to request data completely, and to do so more just in asking for it and not so much getting into a technical discussion. And after that, we'll talk a bit about validating data and really just dealing with just importing regular data. Normally it works, but talking about all the times that it doesn't work, and validation can help that, but then there's just the need to kind of fix data, and that kind of comes with the working with difficult data part. We are going to do a lot of baseline type testing to try to validate and cleanse data. That's like the duplicates and joins and such, and we'll touch on fuzzy joins. I can't do a whole lot. But I did want to kind of touch on as well how macros can help the process and how you can automate a lot of what you're doing here in the import. We will talk about some of the key tables, and if you do have questions about systems that you're running, I'll do my best. I try to keep that out of the slides because I believe it's not, I think it's copyright protected, so I don't like to put entire tables and fields and all of that into the slides, but we can talk about it and I can give you some ideas. And that kind of ends with sort of, with working with a more structured accounting system. How do you get data out of it and put it into a bit of a data mart that you can utilize? So learning objectives done, and just trying to note, we'll have about, if you look at the slides, it's about 20 minutes or so per section, is about where it goes, and in between the polling questions. And polling questions again come pretty randomly, but also with some timing to them. The data files that we're giving you are on an index. I can do my best here to try to drag over that index from Word so that you can see it here. This file should be something that you downloaded as part of the slides today. It was a link that you had. If you don't have it, you can download it from this link here, which is in the slide, and you can type that in and download the files. If you do get bombed out, just try it again. Sometimes if 20, 30 people are hitting it at the same time, we've had just a little trouble there, but just try it again, and you should get it in. But we have a lot of files that we're giving out. There are a lot of others that I will show, and at times I'll do my best to say, this is not one of the files that we've given you today, but we have to find what we've given you today is here. So anything else that you see that's new is stuff that's more proprietary, data files that I'm utilizing that you can, they are available for purchase. You just gotta give me a call. And moving into the first segment of completely requesting data, I find if you can follow a process or a bit of a checklist each time, it does help. I can't say that I do it every time myself, but it is the right way to go. And the first step in all of this is to kind of know your audit objectives, know what reports align to those objectives, and you can use past reports. You can take a look into just assessing based on new data requirements and new process type changes, whether or not you can do a whole lot with that process of data. But the key here, I think, is to then obtain and validate the data. But you need to figure out what you want first before you end up obtaining and validating. So we'll talk a bit about that. Of course, then there's editing scripts and running reports and all that. But I think in going through, say, a procure-to-pay process and looking at the various different types of categories that are here, what I like to think about is kind of taking each one, say purchase requisition and approval, and kind of breaking it out into the primary audit objectives that you have for, let's say, within that area, and then what questions kind of come out of that. And from the questions, you could have scripts or reports, and then that'll drive what data you want to kind of go grab. So again, I'm just trying to show you the brainstorming process in some high-level visuals here, but also to try to say, I think the key here is to do your best to document the reports you want from the key process steps and the reporting objectives. Just to kind of bring over an example here, I had gone through and for sort of each one, bear with me one second here. Just delete that. For each one of the different types of, let's say, purchase approval, I would have questions, and for each types of questions around controls I had, depending on whether or not a report lined up, I would have that report mapped over on this side here. So I mean, this kind of matrix of having the questions here and the reports going out to the right, I did this in more of a VLOOKUP fashion to the reports that are back here, a little fancy, I guess, but I think the key here is just to even document the types of reports that you can have per question, and again, just trying to show you a little more detail there. Okay, another book that I wrote, it's a research project, I don't make any money on it kind of thing, it's sort of for the IIA's benefit, is Proactively Detecting Fraud Using Computer Audit Reports, and it's a listing of all these different reports that you can run. I also want to note that AuditNet is a great place to look for analytic enabled audit programs and just audit programs in general that you could use to kind of think about what types of steps you could run from an analytic perspective. This book goes into kind of each type of fraud and then aligns the reports to each type of fraud. So it's like a systematic way of handling it. But again, it's all just brainstorming tools. I think all of this stuff kind of leads up to the data request, but you kind of have to treat it as brainstorming. So this is a document we do give out. I've just try to grab this and bring this over here to your screen so you can see it. This is in Word. Try to hide that. And what I've done here, depending on the reports that we want to run, we've thought about then all the data fields and files. And this is a pretty good accounts payable version that you could utilize yourself. It has most of the fields that you'd want to get, and the tables as well. The invoice header is the one that has, say, just a listing of each invoice and some notes and questions there. I don't want to spend too much time on this. The invoice distribution is something where it's more of a detailed listing of what's in the header file. So that's something that would be useful for any sort of general ledger type analytics that you may want to run on the data itself. And continuing down further, vendor master file, of course, would be useful for a lot of the tests that were in those process steps that were listed there. And then we get to the different types of data delivery. So how should it be provided? Flat file, Access, Excel. I've kind of listed it in most at least preferred, but you can choose however you'd like. I personally, I have to say, in looking at this, I always say this, I really probably need to put delimited files, up here, because I find that delimited files are something that they come very freely out of systems right now, and I think they do a great job. Data structure-wise, we obviously have what's in here, and then any sort of things that we could do to verify the data. But I think this data request has a lot of things you should think about and what you need to communicate over. So we noted that. But kind of getting into it, just like we've done there, what are all the tables that kind of line up? Let me just go back here. That line up to these process steps. Here, I think if you do your math, I think you'll find that this is a pretty good list. I think user table for like user access might be one to add to this. An employee table might be one to add. But just looking within the accounts payable area, this is kind of a good listing of a lot of the tables that you'd want to get. Just kind of thinking about you need to kind of think about, obviously, the objectives, though, for what you're doing. I wouldn't go out and just ask for every one of these tables, just ask for them. I think the goal here is to kind of make it more objective based and based on what reports that you're actually running. Okay. As you get through this process, and I would not really suggest this day one. I mean, I would probably suggest, note that this is more of a step that, probably should come a little bit, after the test is run and you've validated that it's a good test and you want to do it, and, et cetera. I think documenting the test really well is a great thing to do. And what we tried to do here, this is from a book called The Payables Test Set for ACL, is for each script that we had, we kind of documented the script and what it tells you and what you need to do with the results and all that. But we also listed out the data fields and file names that were available as well. And I think that that's something that just helps in concluding the documentation for the test, and then that way next year when you're doing your data analytics again, you can go back to all of this type of documentation and just kind of recreate what you had. So okay, with that, I'd like to go to our first polling question just to kind of keep the process going here, and just bear with me one second here. I'm just going to launch that. And the question is, what comes first in the data extraction process? Obtain data files, run reports, validate data, or identify reports to run? And this is a good time to ask questions. I mean, we'll, obviously if you have anything specific to you that we can try to help with on the call today or the webinar today, happy to try to answer those. And we'll we take sort of random breaks on these polling questions, yet try to space them out a bit across the 110 or 20 or so minutes of actual talk time. I will leave the poll open for another 20 seconds, 30 seconds. We have about 90% of you voted, so thank you for that. Okay, 97%. We'll just leave it open just a little bit more for people that are just getting started here. And I'm going to close that poll and share that with everyone. Give me a sec here. And 100% of you voted, so thank you. And identifying data reports to run, 80% was the correct answer. So we will hide that poll and continue onward. So in talking about importing data files, what I wanted to do now, now that we've requested data, the theory being that you would now receive some data files. And these are the different types of data files that you would get out of a system, and it depends how old the system is. I probably should have put this in age or something like that. But what I find, starting at the top, that ASCII text data is normally what you get, and that's sort of the PC readable text. Unicode text is also readable, and Excel does a really good job of opening it up actually and reading various things. But as you'll see, you kind of have to select the Unicode setting, and I'm just going to kind of jump ahead for a second here. As you import this delimited data, let's say, it's going to say to you, like, wait a second, what is the different, the type of data that you're bringing in. Now, what's good is if you get an Excel file from, let's say, Bulgaria or another country that uses a different type of alphabet than what we're used to in the English alphabet, then Unicode text comes in, but if they save it as an Excel file, I do need to kind of note this, that the Unicode text is saved within there, so it is readable in Excel quite well, even though it's sort of a hard data file to work with. By contrast, a lot of the audit softwares out there have trouble with this. ACL and ACL has like a separate version just for Unicode data. It does a great job with it, but it literally has a whole separate version. Now, other data files to think about, and I want to just name these because they're good to know each one. EPSIDIC and mainframe can be kind of the same, maybe mixed up the same way, like mainframe could mean AS400, IBM machine or mainframe, but IBM had their own standards, so they didn't go with ASCII, they went with EPSIDIC, which was their own kind of standard, and therefore, anything that you get off of an IBM generally is an EPSIDIC, and then you can convert it to ASCII, which is readable by a PC, but it is native in EPSIDIC. You cannot read EPSIDIC in Excel, so that's something, or probably even a text editor has trouble reading it. ACL, Arbutus, IDEA are products that do read it pretty readily, as do they read COBOL files, which I haven't seen a COBOL file in probably about 5 years. Now, I'm not, I don't work with hundreds of clients or anything, but it's something where I think COBOL and COBOL mainframes are less, likely these days. Getting into the other more popular files, Microsoft Excel, Access, SQL Server type files, Quickbooks files. I find Quickbooks is coming into popularity where a lot of companies are using it to kind of manage the business, even though it's not, let's say an SAP of accounting. It still does a good job, and there are some products to look at that. But PDF files, I have this whole, thing with PDF files in that I don't like them. But yet, a lot of times you have to work with them like there's no other option, and therefore, that's something to look at as well. But I wanted to spend a little bit of time on each one of these because I think we all kind of assume that we're going to get Microsoft Excel files, but assuming we get others, that's kind of where we're going to, talk today. And what I wanted to do is literally just kind of jump into Excel and start opening up a few different data files that I've given you, and that way you can kind of get a sense there. But before I do, let me just kind of go through a couple more slides here, and that is, I think it does make sense to kind of define your data each time. I mean, I guess if you're going to take the data in Excel and go right into an ACL product or IDEA type product, maybe it doesn't make sense to format everything, but I do think it makes a lot of sense to if you are going to keep things in Excel, to do the formatting right, and get like date format set, and if you're not going to add or subtract the field, I would set it as a text type field, even if it's like a payment type 01, that's something where it's, I guess, a number, but yet I would make that a character so that you could summarize on it and do things a lot easier with it. And then from a decimal place point of view, anything that sometimes you find a lot of data. I find JDE data that I get out of JDE systems doesn't have the decimal place imputed, so you have to divide or multiply, by the point, divide by 100 in that case to kind of put in the decimal place. And otherwise just defining as a numeric format works. But I wanted to just kind of talk through data field definitions, as well as noting I don't have a Unicode data file to open, but I wanted to show you when it is Unicode what happens. And what you need to do is basically find the standard that it's based upon. So if it is Russia, they'll have their own standard. But again, if they could save it for you in an Excel file, it saves you a whole lot of time. So, with that, before I dive into anything else, let me kind of jump over to some of the data files that were provided. And, we have a fixed, I kind of went with the paid, file. Now, if you have ACL, I do, have the ability to kind of open up ACL as well, but if you don't have ACL, and you can look at some of the stuff in ACL, but if you don't have ACL, that's fine, and because we can do all of this stuff in Excel, so it's not really a big deal. And so opening up Excel, and I'm just going to kind of go to a new workbook, or even just kind of close this. Actually, let me just get a new workbook open so it doesn't. All right, and what I want to do is to open up a data file, and I'm going to have to hunt a little bit for this, but it'll get quicker in the next go around. And normally it's going to bring up Excel files, and I mean I can open up the paid file XLSX, which is the Excel version of the paid file, and what I wanted to do is kind of open up each file for you so that you can get a sense of how opening up each file is. And of course everything right now when you look at it has been set to general, and a lot of times just one kind of key note, you have to kind of do it on the import of a text file, which we'll talk about in a second, but this is where you see the general, and or down below here you have something called text, and there really is a difference. But I find if you try to set it after the fact, like if I now go into this and say no, this is a text, it doesn't a lot of times have the same effect as if when you're importing it, and I can't really put my finger on that too well, but we'll talk about that in a second, and I just wanted to show you where it is in the menu bar. Now, going back to that folder, though, if I open up all files and now kind of look for let's say the tab delimited version of the file, what will come up is immediately kind of this gobbledygook. And notice here how if you did have a different, I guess, language, it'd be coming up, or alphabet, sorry, it would be coming up. And I know Cyrillic works a lot for Eastern European countries. And by kind of selecting the tab in this case, and I guess there was, commas, or excuse me, quotes in there that were delimiting in between the text fields. So between the two of those, it delimited my data. Now this is kind of the step I was saying before of setting things to text. It isn't a bad idea to try your best if you can go through this. You can keep it general, by the way, if it's an amount. But if it's a date, go to the month, day, year. And I think there's something to be said for doing this. Now, I've noticed things like, oh gosh, I'm trying to think what it shows up. It's scientific notation is the name for it. And I find that a lot of times you'll have numbers in fields that if you don't kind of set it to text, it will essentially kind of create an E-01 or something. It's like basically a scientific notation of that number. And by setting things to text when you're importing, that kind of solves that problem. So, again, I haven't done it for all of them, but just wanted to kind of give you that idea of making sure that you bring things in as text. And notice as I brought this in as a text field, it even has the little green arrow to the left, if you can see that says we have an error, and it's a number stored as a text. And I'm like, yeah, that I do want to do that, because in essence, this isn't something that I would ever multiply or subtract or anything right now. So yeah, I would rather just kind of keep that as a text field, and then the check amount field, which I will add and subtract and etc. That is what I set to more and should set to more of a number format, which I can do there. Okay, so that's a delimited file. Now that would work with comma-separated files, by the way, as we open them. I don't know if I have an example of a comma-separated one, but the comma-separated one will generally just open up, so I'll give a try, to one of these others, but let me just bring in the fix file just to show. So comma separated, I didn't have an example of. The tab was kind of the one to show as an example of delimited. Now this is a different type. This is more fixed width, and fixed width is something where you literally go and you kind of have to kind of hunt and peck around to decide where to place each one of these things. But if you do your kind of geography right, with this, you should be geometry right. Sorry, you should be able to get that set up there, and bring in the file. And it's a matter of kind of just lining things up with those little bars. What I'll do is I'll just for the most part, it works the same way as the tab delimited, but in this case is more, of just kind of setting the fixed lengths. Now, I wanted to try to show this in a different light, and just kind of opening this up here. We're going to talk about this a little bit later, but I wanted to kind of open up this fixed file, at least in this product, and we'll wait for that to open up. But while that's opening up, I wanted to show you how to import the two files that we just did in ACL, because I think it's kind of useful to see, well, how does a data analytic product, that's kind of focused on doing this, how does it handle things? And we'll just kind of redo this. I have already set up the files in here so you could go through, and you can go to edit table layout if you have ACL, and you can look at the various kind of fields that we've set up and the formats of those fields. But let me attempt to kind of bring this in again, and I'm going to look for the fix file in this case. Bear with me. And I'll just bring in this fix file here. Now, it's really thinking about it. Now, ACL has many options, and if it was delimited or Excel or even a PDF option, which we're going to talk about next, it would figure that out. Now, in this case, if I say I guess it's a little bit variable length, which I think I know the reason why, but for the most part, it's very fixed, as you could kind of see the columns and how everything lines up. And we would just kind of go through this. Now, you can do the same thing here, but I don't like how that works, so I generally go skip field identification in ACL as I'm bringing in the file, and I just sort of bring it in on its own, and it's going to overwrite what we had, and that's okay. And then what I can do is I can highlight, each field, which you could see here is very fixed, and do something like check them out, 2 decimal places, and hopefully I got that right. And then so on and so forth. You could kind of set the fields. We'll just do one more just to kind of show you the difference here. This would be a check date, and it is month. Okay. And so in this way it kind of brings in the file. Now I'm pretty sure, right, this is a carriage return text file, the way the fixed file is set, and that's as opposed to a full fixed record length file. It is, it's fixed length, but there are some carriage returns at the end that sometimes vary a little bit as to where their placement is. But anyway, with that, you can kind of set each of the fields here in ACL. It just takes a little bit longer, but once it's done, that fixed format will always work because it's a fixed format. There's so that's the good news about that. Okay. So, we basically have looked at 3 different files. Now, there's one other file that I almost want to bring it up in this product, if I can get this open here. So I just wanted to show you this text editor before and just kind of bring in the fixed file into this. Now, this is a text editor called EditPad Pro, and it's a little, I just have to get rid of my word wrap. Again, when you're in the actual text file, you can kind of see how things line up, that there is no spaces in between. It's very kind of tight how that works. And likewise, if I pull the tab delimited one in here, and once again, just have to kind of get rid of word wrap. You can't really see the tabs yet, but if I visualize the spaces, you can see this is a tab in between each one of these. And I mean, if you ever wanted to convert this, I don't know why you'd want to do this, but if you want to convert it, you can actually like search for the tabs and replace them with like a comma or something, or whatever, any sort of crazy character you'd like to put in there. So, this is another way of kind of looking at data and cleansing it, which we'll talk about in a second, but I wanted to show you the data in like multiple ways so that you can get an idea of when you're bringing it into Excel, kind of like what's happening behind the scenes. The last one that is harder is this report file. I think just what I'll do here is just try to bring in one of these. And this is kind of the sample data that they give you for ACL, and this has, you can kind of see how it's set up where you have headers up here, and those headers will repeat at various places throughout the data, and has page numbers and that kind of thing, and each of that needs to be kind of taken out. Now, you can do this in Excel. I mean, you can just kind of bring, like, this is really kind of easy because you could just bring this into Excel and do the fixed formatting like we just talked about, and the only problem will be these header rows up here. But if you just sorted on customer number, it would bring all the numbers to the top, and then you would now have, your nice clean data file. So a lot of these report files are not so bad, to work with, but let me attempt to find one that might be a little bit harder. Yep, so now this is one where, let's say we want to take the product class and we want to write it down to each record down below. That's something where, that's a more difficult, thing to do, and that's where some of these other products we're going to talk about come in. But I find it's where you need to kind of get to an ACL or a Monarch or something like that in order to define these files. So, getting back to the slides. Okay. We were just here and kind of talking about the different types of files. We kind of opened up each one in a variety of formats just so you can get an idea of sort of each one. And of all the data files, excuse me, FCDIC and mainframe are probably the only ones you can't read in Excel, and everything else you could somehow make it work or import in. The only somewhat exception to that is PDF conversion options, and the PDF is something where it's an Adobe kind of, I believe, Adobe product, and it saves it in this print document format, so it doesn't really, it's not something that can be changed, and that's good as long as it's very consistent in how it kind of reads the data, because if it's consistent you can kind of do a lot with it. And to that end, I just wanted to kind of show, I don't have the product loaded on this computer, and we don't have a whole lot of time for it, but I wanted to kind of show you one of the products that is out there. Let me just bear with me 1 minute here. And it's basically this able to extract, product. There are many products out there. I find Monarch is probably one of the better, files, out there, or products out there in order to convert PDF files, but if you can, hopefully see this video starting up here. What I tried to do here is open up the PDF document just so you could kind of see it. And then what I did was I opened up my able to extract product. So we're going to open up a CIA list, which is sort of a list of all world leaders throughout the world. And it basically had me open the file. I opened it up. I believe I do a bit of an automatic, but you can kind of select, what data you want to convert, and then I selected Excel, but you have many options. You can go to HTML and all this stuff. And I'm not showing you the whole activity. I believe I stopped this video and kind of, you'll see in just a second here, it'll switch over. And what we then kind of have is this Excel file that comes out. And apologize, it's a little fuzzy here, which is probably good for the names. But what it did was it kind of lined things up into columns. So what was in that PDF file is now lined up. It's not perfect clean, is the way I look at it. Like, this product does an okay job and this is able to extract. It's sort of like what you would expect from a lot of these PDF converter tools. And one thing that in particular that's a bit of an issue is how you have kind of the government or the location at the top there in row 1008, and you kind of need to write it down to each one of the records down below there. And it's sort of annoying that you have to create these if statements to kind of make up for that. Now, some of the other products like ACL, Monarch, etc., allow you to kind of bring that information down. This is over, but I did want to kind of show that to you because it's kind of a quick little way of giving you an idea of how to bring in a PDF document. I've even noticed in Adobe, Adobe Reader nowadays that they have this like convert your document online. I'm not sure that you want to do that because you have to upload your data online, but I still think it's something that you may want to consider. So just continuing on here, the last thing I wanted to note for QuickBooks, I have a link there, but it goes to this QuickBook to Excel converter, and it'll take a QuickBook. You have to have QuickBooks running, and with QuickBooks running, you open up this add-in, and you just kind of run this export feature, and it exports all the data tables from QuickBooks to Excel. And I think a lot of people can use reporting out of QuickBooks. Like, they don't need to have anything more than that. But I do find that this tool does a great job of pulling anything out very, very quickly from QuickBooks if that's something you're interested in. So let us kind of go to the next polling question. If you have any questions, this is a great time. But what data is unreadable in Excel? ASCII, Access, EBCDIC, or Unicode? Give everyone just another minute to kind of fill this out. Most of you have voted. And one question came in on an XLAM file. It must have been in the files that I've sent over. But if not, no, I don't think it was in the files that I sent over. But if what is it? It's a macro-enabled file, and what you'll need to do is go into your Excel settings and and it depends like what Excel version you have, but to kind of go in and set those macro settings to at least to be more of like a warning as opposed to a complete turn off of macros. Because if it turns everything off, then nothing happens. Almost everyone's voted. I'll just give it another 10 or so seconds. We have like 94% voted here. And again, I'll just give it another few seconds. And EBCDIC is the correct answer, 90% of people noting that. ASCII is actually readable, that's the PC format, and Unicode is sometimes not readable, I guess, in Excel, but generally you can open it up as long as you kind of set that little setting to the right language, it works fine. All right, so we are back to validating data and kind of avoiding the garbage in, garbage out sort of scenario. Now, I still find making a checklist is a great idea, and I think I can't follow enough of them, and I don't. I try to follow them each time, and many times I don't do as well as I should. But in validating data, I think some of the key, if we're just taking this procure to pay accounts payable example and just following it through as an example here, do we have all the data fields requested? Yes, no. Is there one supplier record in the master file? Or basically for the same vendor number, do you have 3 or 4 records for the same supplier number? That's weird. Is there one invoice per record in the invoice file? Or is it more of a distribution file? Like sometimes you don't know what you're getting until they may tell you, we've given you the invoice header file, and each invoice is showing up on a line, but then you get it, and it ends up being this detailed file, and that kind of makes it a little harder to understand. Let me just see here some other quick notes here, some of the things on transaction types, and I talked about the scientific notation of an invoice, but that's something that happens a lot. Like if you have more than 30, or I think it's like more than 30 digits in a field, it will sometimes go to scientific, but if you use that text thing that I talked about before, that is a way to kind of solve that. Okay, I think what we're going to talk about in a second as well as sort of asking questions, and I even had questions in the data request letter around check payments and voided payments and things like that. I think a lot of that are good questions, but then I think you need to kind of jump into some sort of trend analysis and taking a look at your data itself and looking at the actual trends. Now, this is more for other classes. We do this more in the other ones where we do kind of pivot tabling and visualization and such. But kind of going back to this paid file, there's not a whole lot in here, but just by pivot tabling the data that's in here, and taking a look at it, hopefully I can do this on the fly pretty well, but looking by vendor number. And I wanted to kind of look at who's entering that vendor number. So the kind of the enter initial for that vendor number, and maybe kind of a count of how many, but by just by kind of dragging these fields into the column and row area at the area over here, you can very quickly trend things, and I find within pivot tables you have this opportunity to kind of change it from vendor to enter date, and now have kind of your dates, and you can even do it kind of sorting things now based on the count, descending here and say what was the day that we had the most invoices put in, and all that, and I think that sort of validation is good. I mean, I'm just going to bring this up and say for accounts payable, one of the things that I tend to look for is just, do you have every month of data? A lot of times you'll find the months of March and April are missing from an entire data set of a year, and it's like this 2 months worth or something, and they'll tell you, oh yeah, we forgot to load that actual file, or to load that actual tape or whatever. I'm going back to the old days now, but that happens at times, and it's something to look for just to kind of summarize things by month. I did it by day in this example here, but you can do it by month, and again I'll attempt doing this quickly, but I don't know if I can. If I want to group that selection by month and year, very quickly you can kind of group things by month and year and say, hey, we're missing a given month in 1996 or what have you. Okay, I think taking some sort of a modeled approach to it, similar to what I've been saying of getting a bit of a checklist going, I think is a good idea. I have a lot of the questions here. Again, we have other courses that we've done that go into each one of these categories much deeply, and we run lots of different reports. But I think just keeping some of the basics in mind. Let me just kind of go to this next one here. From a who perspective, summarizing things by who is putting it in there, taking a look at who are the authorized users and what other activity might be in there that isn't being posted by authorized users, or it might be system or computer activity that you could exclude, kind of thing. But just by summarizing it, you learn these things. Summarizing by the amount, the digits itself, the words within that file, I think is also a way of kind of understanding things pretty quickly. And from a where perspective, we'll talk about kind of geo mapping things, and we'll talk quickly about it, but still just to give you a sense of how some of those things work. And from a when point of view, we've already talked about that. But I think to take each one of these perspectives, and I've tried to give you a couple of examples here, and analyze that as you're getting the data is a great way of understanding data. Again, don't have a whole lot of time for this, but we have a course coming up actually in a couple of weeks around textual analytics. But this is something where in looking at just word patterns without getting too deep into what's happening here, just kind of looking at the number of letters that are showing up in words for a given company's data set, like looking at, let's say, a text field of accounts payable, the field where they explain things, and kind of looking for patterns this year to last year with regards to some of the key letters that are being utilized. You could summarize this a lot of different ways, and what I find, more so than anything, is that it ends up creating a bit of a fingerprint of data. So just going back to, like, we were just looking at a few items there, but in this particular case, actually, sorry, this is, I think, the keyword analysis that we did. So we were kind of looking at what keywords are showing up for a given company, and the keywords, by the way, are over here, like adjustment, account, adjust, allowance, audit, words that are kind of weird. And what we looked for then is the pattern of how they change over time, but also in what letters are being used. And you can very quickly see the letter A, probably for adjustment or allowance, like we were just talking about, kind of spikes up there in a given month, and it actually climbs for about 3 or 4 months or so. So I mean, it's something that I think is a good idea to kind of look at these patterns, just to kind of get a better sense of your data. In summary terms, the textual analytics kind of gives you that perspective very quickly. We do have a whole course on it because it just takes a lot of time to explain all the different things that you can do with it. But just understanding the patterns of the words that are happening, understanding the patterns of the keywords that you care about, words that you're worried about, I think is useful. And I think it gives you a much richer perspective of what's happening in the data. A lot of times we focus on only Benford's law, which is just numbers, but by looking at the text, you're also getting a better sense and a more fuller sense. Looking at some of the WorldCom, I mean, some of the frauds have happened. This is WorldCom, and in looking at Wikipedia, the word line costs and corporate unallocated revenue accounts showed up quite a bit in the data. And if somebody was looking for that, I'm sure at some point they started, but if somebody was looking for that at the get-go and maybe kind of did a graph like this of what are some of the new words that are happening and new phrases that are happening, which is an analysis that you can do pretty quickly, you can very quickly kind of read the fingerprint of what people are saying in the general ledger just by looking at the words they're using. Gives you a bit of this fingerprint like we talked about. Okay, so the validating of data can be a lot of the summaries like we've talked about so far, but I think the next step in this is to go get some disparate data. So I think even just taking some things that have been stated from the PCAOB recently for those that care about Sarbanes-Oxley, there's been a lot of talk about the evidence that's being obtained around general ledger completeness testing. and that goes to the whole general ledger to trial balance type matching. So I think, basically the general ledger is the activity that's in between the beginning and ending trial balance. So, you should be able to get the ending trial balance minus the beginning, get the difference, and that would be your activity. And that's a key test, and something even the PCAOB has said auditors haven't been doing as well of in their reports. But that's a simple one, and I think, be it accounts payable, you might want to manage or take a look at what's in the general ledger, and that goes back to the distribution file. That's that distribution, which should tie back to the header, which is one invoice per record, and then that should go into the general ledger file that's posted. And by, again, getting like the general ledger file and the AP file, human resource to payroll, there's a lot of different ones here. I'll just kind of note a couple here that are good audit tests. Taking a T&E system and matching it to a P-card system and taking a look at the actual vendor paid for given amounts is a way of looking at people that may have changed the name of the vendor from whatever, to something else, so it may have been where they actually paid off a debt, but then they called it Marriott Hotel in the T&E system. Again, that's more of an audit test than kind of testing whether or not the data is properly, being managed and integrating, but still, it's a good test if you're in there. And now I wanted to then talk about external data. So there's a lot of work happening these days on vendor categorization, so just taking your vendors and categorizing them, and also, cleansing data files, just cleansing your master file, determining whether or not you have the right information for vendor records. And that's where, looking at external data sources can help a lot in that regard. So this is the TIN matching service this is U.S., for U.S. tax identification numbers. You can upload 100,000 at a time, employees, vendors, etc. Again, you may want to kind of check whether or not your security will allow that, but in doing so, you're able to quickly get a sense of, is the tax identification number valid? Is it something that's ever been issued or not issued, right? That would be weird. Or does it relate to somebody else? Now, they won't tell you the somebody else, but at least they'll tell you it doesn't relate to that person, and then that's also kind of a useful thing to check. Validating addresses with PowerMap, without kind of showing it today, just kind of showing you these pictures, PowerMap is something for Excel 2013, and I purposely don't even show you Excel 2013 on my system here, because most people don't have Excel 2010 yet even. So they're more at, let's say, 2007. So because of that, I tend to show 2010. But with that said, 2013 I do have on another machine, and I even had a video which is kind of graphical, but I won't play it today. And it kind of goes through basically a videotaped version of the graphs that or of the maps that you made. But the one thing that I really like doing, just forgetting kind of all the maps and graphs and stuff that you can make, is that it actually tells you which employee addresses didn't match anything in the geo mapping. So in this case, we have employee addresses, and but it could be vendor addresses or customer addresses. If it doesn't match up with geo mapping service, that's kind of weird, and we probably should take a look at that. So, you might want to go a little bit further and actually research a vendor, that's on that list. I mean, definitely if you, have some vendors that you have concerns about from a fraud perspective or what have you, you can do a lot online. I mean, so I want to kind of start off with a couple of things that you could do, like the TIN matching and geocoding that we talked about here. But I think just going to the research books that are out there, like this Manual to Online Public Records, I think it's like a $50 book, but it explains how to go to various state databases and other types of free places to go to kind of get information. So I kind of continuing on with this idea of validating things. This is something that it's a data file we'll show you at some point that I won't be able to give away, but you can contact me if you want it. And it's something where I do think regardless, you should be thinking about the different types of Excel sheets that you're utilizing. And so just kind of going to Excel, in itself, I always like to show this. We've gone a long way, from VisitCalc to Excel, and this is Excel 2003, so being shown here, and there's a lot more that's happened since then. But I find Excel can be quite dangerous. I mean, it's something where it is its own, developmental system, and people can kind of develop what they want. There's really no developmental process. It doesn't track generally what you do. There are some products to help you audit this that you can pay for, and they help manage what people are doing, but it's still pretty sketchy, what you can track. There's not a whole lot of built-in controls, hardly any security. So if you're getting data files that are in Excel, even text files, can be edited. I mean, someone can go into a text editor, like, I was trying to show you today, and, somebody could go into any one of these reports and say, I'm going to change this to 21,000, 702, and that will actually, it's something where I can change the data. So it's a little scary when you get things from, let's say, ASCII or or an Excel format that you can make changes to it. That's a reason to do a lot of this other kind of validating and checking. Now, on Excel files, I like to kind of look at a variety of Excel files and think about which data files that you may want to grab, and I wanted to kind of run through quickly here a way of kind of calculating risk. But one thought is just looking at the significance of that report, or Excel file. If it's managing billions of dollars of wire transfers, that might be something to take a look at from a significance point of view. It also, from a complexity point of view, it may have a lot of formulas and external links and things like that can go wrong and break. So that's a problem. And from a what can we do to kind of look for this? Well, you can kind of open up the spreadsheets and do a bit of finding the formula errors. And one of the things, if you go to special, which is sort of your well, I believe it's in the home menu, you're able to kind of quickly get to a variety of things like errors and formulas, just even finding all the formulas and having it kind of highlight them all. And then once you've done that, you can very quickly just kind of highlight them all, literally with a highlighter. But this is a way of kind of just grabbing a lot of information and more so things that are risky within the data. Things you might want to do is even do a bit of a kind of a search for things like if formulas or external links where there is a way to kind of search for the link itself. These are all things that kind of play into the complexity of that spreadsheet. And again, this is more for people that are kind of looking at a group and let's say they do a lot of their accounting in Excel. This might be a way to kind of get a lot of their Excel spreadsheets and work with it. So again, kind of thinking about complexity of spreadsheets, things that I like to think about, are things like obviously having lots of formulas, and if you have a sum if or sum minus or what have you. And with that said, let me kind of get to this next polling question. Actually, you know what? Instead of the polling, let me just kind of jump to this next slide. I think we're doing pretty well on time. I wanted to show this. This kind of shows something that we're going to play with in Excel in just a minute here, where it indexes your hard drive and kind of looks for a lot of these things quickly. And I think you can manually do this. So I'm not saying you have to use this product, but we even have a bit of a video on how it works and more on it. But again, I'm going to kind of show how that works. But before we do that, let me just kind of talk a little bit more about the product. All it does is really just kind of open up files. You're just opening up an index file and then kind of running a particular macro that's associated. So we're going to show that in a second here. And the weighting factors, when you look at it, are things like the number of rows, the number of columns in the file, number of cells, blanks, hidden, used, errors, formulas, etc. Sum plus, sum minus, all of that kind of represented here. And with that, let me kind of go to this polling question. Trying to keep it to the 20 minutes, but what increases spreadsheet complexity? Is it sum minus, errors, formulas, or all of the above? And again, yeah, and one question here, compared to ACL, Excel has a limited line number, and the question is yes, it is limited. I believe it's 1,048,000 or so is the line limit, which is still pretty effective. I mean, I don't think it's perfect, but I do think that for a lot of the businesses that you'll take a look at, you'll tend to kind of fit within that. Within that bandwidth. And just kind of checking for any other questions that have come in. I'll keep the polling question open just for another 10 or so seconds, 15 seconds. I see that most of you have signed into it though. So the correct answer, all of the above. We just talked about it a second ago, and did want to kind of show that. So let me kind of quickly show you this product here. So what what I have here is an add-in called Active Data, and you can index kind of workbooks in this case, and that kind of scans a particular folder. I scanned a particular folder. It was actually a file called Webinar Errors that we're going to take a look at, and what it did was it kind of highlighted each one of the sheets or work tabs and the type of things, and then the number of rows and columns, and it kind of calculated all those factors we were just talking about, number of hidden worksheets and number of used cells and name ranges and formulas and errors and sum plus and sum minus and who created it and all this other cool information. So what I have is a macro then that's built into the spreadsheet that basically you run the macro, just kind of view and kind of run that particular macro, but by doing so, it basically allows you to weight the various factors that you consider to be a problem, and then this ends up becoming the final weighting of that. And I think in this case, what did it say? It ended up thinking that example 3 in this worksheet or in webinar errors was the problem. So let me just kind of go to webinar errors here just for a second. And it actually thought that example 3 was kind of the worst one, and it's probably because it had so many cells and rows and columns, but also had some errors in here as well. So if you do get a lot of Excel files, I don't we don't have a lot of time to kind of go through all these, but one of the things that you can kind of quickly do is go into the formulas section, and you can kind of do something like show formulas. And it very quickly, kind of gives you all formulas that are calculated here. It probably has a few sum ifs and some minuses and whatnot. You can also do error checking, and it might give you a lot of errors, so be careful here. But you can sit here and just kind of go through all the the particular types of errors that are here. But let me kind of click off of that. There are other things like, I think I can do this here. I think I could say trace, no, it's trace precedent. So it has trace precedent to kind of get to what was leading to this field, and you can see the calculations of that. Kind of yeah, so you have to highlight themselves. But wanted to kind of show you some of the error checking within here. Now, from a find point of view, there are, again, depending on the version of Excel that you have, and in taking this, you can go to or go to special, but you can also kind of just go to the formulas, but let me kind of go to special, and we'll just say maybe formulas with errors, just to kind of note that, and voila, it kind of brought us to that one, and there's probably a way of going to the next one kind of thing as well, but anyway, it does a quick thing of finding any sort of errors within formulas. So continuing on here, I just wanted to show you in validating Excel spreadsheets kind of a little bit more of a complex way of kind of working with a macro that would calculate the different type of risk or likelihood that a particular spreadsheet is going to fail on you, but also to say when you do get those spreadsheets to kind of look for formulas and look for errors and things like that. I don't think it's a bad idea, even if you don't go with the more advanced approach to kind of giving you what you need. So kind of working with difficult data, and we did get a question coming in, is there a way, are there other ways to merge two sheets in Excel where the line numbers of each sheet is running to the maximum? So, 1 million line number for each sheet. I think, probably what you're thinking here is where, if you try to put two sheets together, that it would run over to the next spreadsheet so that you'd have almost like an overflow copy-paste, and it would kind of copy only what you needed into the next sheet. You can do it with a macro. It's beyond kind of today's discussion, but it isn't something that is standard for Excel. You kind of need to build like an import macro and have the import macro run and ultimately provide you with that that type of analysis. With that thought in mind, working with difficult data, we have talked about text editors and combining files. Well, one way to combine files, but it's not going to help you so much in Excel. But what I would do is if you can get a text editor product. We noted a couple on the slide there, but this is EditPad Pro, and this is just one example. Let me just kind of go to the spreadsheet here. This is something where, in order to kind of copy and paste one on top of another, you very easily can kind of highlight what you'd like to copy and paste, put it to a new schedule, and let's imagine we're kind of copying and pasting the same stuff, but we'll just kind of start and let me just bear with me 1 second here. Just kind of get down to here. And just copy that again. So what that does is it would allow you to kind of copy, two files on top of one another, and in doing so, one of the things that you could do, it's sort of hard to see, but down below here you can kind of see the rows and columns, and I believe we're at row 22 and character number 18, so it's like row 22, character 1, etc. And I mean, in here, this would be a way of kind of merging things together, and doing that in a text editor. What's nice is if you realize that this data down here is going past the million record limit, you could then copy and paste it. Like you could just kind of go down in the rows to the last row and then copy and paste whatever is remaining into another tab or another spreadsheet in Excel. So I'm not trying to make it a manual exercise, but that might be a way of approaching that merge, and again that kind of goes to exactly what we were talking about. From a cleaning, tables point of view, we talked about an EditPad Pro where you can visualize this stuff. There's a lot of ways to just do like find and replace a lot easier. Like in Excel, it'll take a long time. In EditPad Pro, it'll just take like a second, to go through the whole file and adjust, let's say, a carriage returned and turn a carriage returned into something else, for example. So that's a good thing. Now, I did my best here of going through a variety of training and books and, and thinking about, even just thinking about what were all the functions that I'd used. And I can't, promise that we're going to, utilize all these functions today. Let's try to get rid of that. But I wanted to do my best and go into Excel. And let me just bring this over here. And in just opening up a simple data file, just kind of let's say that paid file that we had before, paidfile.xlsx, and just to kind of play around a little bit with these functions so that you can get a sense of how they work. Now, I find that these are really invaluable in cleansing your data, in kind of saying, well, we only need the first digit of the check number, and that first digit is the left the left of one character, and then that'll kind of be the check number digit, for that left one, and that kind of sets up that particular function. You can also kind of calculate a length of a field, and that might be useful if you're looking, let's say, at an invoice number and trying to determine the length of that invoice number, for a vendor or so, or just does it look reasonable? Do I have invoice numbers in here that are, let's say, 500 or something? Another one that's really useful is the mid function. So I'm just going to use the mid function here and say, I'm just going to go to the second character, and I'm going to go for 3 characters, and we'll just try our best here to copy that down. And you can kind of see here how starting at that second character 7 and going for 3 characters, it pulls out 797. So this is a way of using text functions to essentially update data. Now, I see that this is in proper format already of kind of treehouse and DR, but if you want to change it to proper, we also have upper and lower later. Trim is very useful if you're doing VLOOKUP. I find that trim and clean, which is on the next slide, clean, can be a really useful tool. So is sometimes, like, you could look at a data field many times and say, or there's nothing in here, I can't see anything, but sometimes there are special characters in there. So in this particular case, if I do trim and then also clean, and then just kind of go over to that field there, I'm not saying it, all I'm saying is that is a way of cleaning things up so that if you're doing VLOOKUPs and you want things to work better, a lot of times the VLOOKUP will work a lot better if you've done like a trim and a clean on the field. So, and what trim does is it gets rid of double spaces in between, whoops, let me go back here. It gets rid of kind of double spaces in between words, and then it removes all spaces on either side of the data. So that's I find a really useful one, because the VLOOKUP is something that gets very sensitive, and what I would normally do is I would copy this all the way down, the file here, but then I would copy it and I would do a paste special, and the paste special will then solidify that as now this converted number, and notice it doesn't have the one one apostrophe, I guess, there, and instead just has the number itself, and it's all cleaned of all special characters or anything. Okay. Kind of an interesting one was the repeat function. If we use RAPT, I've never used this until I saw this in our book here, but let me, oops. And you just need to put an equal sign ahead of that, and that'll, I believe, create 20 stars. So if you ever want to make a line in a report, you could put like 200, and then it would go out for a long ways to the right. So it's kind of a neat little function. Okay, getting into the math functions that are out there. The value function will kind of turn things into a value. I mean, it might be useful, but generally I use kind of this number formatting. You just kind of highlight the cell and just go to number formatting and change it. The is and a would be for an if formula, which we'll talk about in a second. The average, the median, the max, let's kind of do that. You can just say average, and then you could highlight a range of cells, if I can find this here, so the invoice or check amount here. You can highlight this entire range, and the average of all of them is $4,444, of all those different different fields. Now, kind of taking that same concept and now changing it to median. It's so the median of that, as opposed to the average, and is sort of just right in the middle there, is $845. If I change it to the max, we can see what the largest value in there is. It's $117,000, and the min is probably 0 or a penny, is a negative 3333. So there's standard deviation as well. I mean, there's a whole lot of things in here, but I find this is really useful if you could, at the top of your schedules, have a lot of these things calculated so that you can get a real quick sense when you look at data. What's the average? What's the max? What's the min? It gives you a really good range of like what you're looking at very quickly. The absolute value can be useful, for a lot of times you'll get like payment files where the check payment is a negative as opposed to a positive, and that would be something that definitely would be useful as well. To kind of change them to positives. The mod function and the round function, round kind of sets it to decimal places. The mod function kind of calculates whether or not it's a round number. So this is more for an audit report, I find, where you're kind of looking for round numbers but wanted to note it. From a date and time function point of view, that this can also be useful. Let me just kind of show you how to play with these functions. These are all, just cleaning up data. But let's say, you had a date field that was in day, month, and year format. So, this is something where, we wanted to kind of show this to you before going into these date time functions. So let me just bear with me one second here. Let me just go into Excel and just show this to you. And if your column widths ever get too wide, you can just change it to what you want there by right-clicking, going column width, because I had to fix that a bit. But let's say you had a date like that, which is more day, month, year format. Many times Excel won't read that properly for you, but one thing that you could do is use kind of this left function and just to kind of pull out the components, the mid function, and kind of the mid function again. And what you can then do is kind of put it all back together with concatenate. So I wanted to show that to you. And so what I can do now is, if I want to build it back, I can just kind of go equal in that field. I can then use the ampersand sign and kind of put in quotes a little date mark, ampersand sign, the 23rd, and 2014, and I got my date format right. But that will kind of set it in a format that now that you set it to a date, it will accept that a lot easier and be able to work with it. So that's one format. I mean, another format is if you have kind of a date format like this already set up, just kind of going to these slides here. You can then kind of pull out the day, the month, and the year. So let me just kind of work down here for just a second. If we kind of take the day out of that field, it's the 9th. You can then take the month out of here as well. And the reason I suggest doing some of this day, month, year stuff is sometimes when you're working with pivot tables, the pivot table won't recognize the date as a proper date, and you'll need to kind of go through this conversion to make that work. So I wanted to note that, because I do find that tends to be a bit difficult at times. Yeah, some other cool things to do is maybe kind of setting up whether or not it was, in the time frame of a Sunday to a Saturday. Was it a Saturday or a Sunday? Also, I thought this was a really cool one. I've never used it, but it's identifying the actual network days or work days in a whole number from start to end. So it takes out all of the weekends in the analysis, and I thought that was kind of neat that it did that. Other things that are useful is the week num. I've used this for a lot of pivot tables, and just I don't know what the actual week num of that field was, but it's basically the second week of 1996 was the 9th, and I'm sure if you looked at that would be true. I find the week calculation can be something that is useful when you're doing any sort of stratifications or summarizations by customer and kind of looking in more of a week format year over year even, just to get a sense of the change over time. Okay, so at this point, I'm going to go to my next polling question. And what function is used to convert all numbers, negative or positive, to a positive? Is it the ABS, the ACE, the ASB, or the API? Okay, so everyone has voted. Let me close that poll. Thank you for doing so. If you have any questions, feel free to post them. I don't see any coming in. And ABS, or absolute value, is absolutely correct. So let me hide that. Okay, so I wanted to continue looking at the different field formats and how you can kind of work with some of these fields. The vendor address field could be one that we could take a look at. But before I do, let me just kind of jump back to the slides here because I wanted to open these up and kind of walk you through a few more of these. So the if and the sum if, I know a lot of people have worked with if statements before. We're going to have a whole course on functions, and I know we use them a lot. But I think the if statement can be utilized here to kind of test data files, maybe set up a stratification like we've done here, or just to summarize things if something's true. But I find pivot tables work a lot better, in my opinion, as opposed to sum if. But it may be something that is useful for you. And again, I like to show it because it's like an alternative to pivot tabling where you can kind of summarize, let's say, all check values, that were paid in 2015, and that could be like a sum if that's put at the top of the Excel spreadsheet as a bit of a validation test of what you're looking at. Now, I wanted to just show you here, it's a little hard to see, but we do have teammate analytics and active data for Excel. I've been showing active data for Excel, but both of them have this ability to do a lot of conversion. Now, I did my best here of showing you 30 or 40 functions, but what I find is that teammate analytics and active data have a lot of this stuff built in, and it does save me time. I mean, I will admit that I use both of those products, but probably active data on my cell conversion techniques. And just to kind of show this one thing to you, this allows you to kind of to convert cells. I mean, it has a lot of functions like splitting columns, combining fields, etc. And so does teammate analytics. But okay, back to the cells. We were talking about how you can convert cells by like removing leading and trailing spaces. That's the trim function. But another one is removing non-alphanumeric characters. And watch when I do this. If I highlight that field, what it does is it took care of basically any punctuation or anything in that given field. You can also kind of convert it again and say, you know, cell text to uppercase, and it'll move everything to uppercase. And it is sort of this fast way of sort of quickly changing your data and making it a lot, you know, more user-friendly, let's just say. Even that issue before where we had kind of this date here, I don't know how this is going to work, but I believe you can go cell to date, and let me just check if it's going to ask me. Yep, I think it may have converted it automatically to 11/23/2014 actually. So in another version of their product, they have a different way of doing it where you kind of tell it what you want. But anyway, I wanted to kind of show you that there are other add-ins and options that can kind of make this even easier, like if the functions scare you. One of the questions, what version of Excel am I using? I'm using Excel 2010. I have used 2013 in the past, some past videos, but we gave up on it because no one has it. And 2007 isn't very much different. I've done like an analysis quickly. There's a web page that analyzes the difference between 7 and 10. And it's a little bit in like where things are, but for the most part it's in the same, like the home menu gives you that option and that kind of thing. But thank you for that question. Okay, so kind of moving into cleaning and removing duplication. I have a couple of spreadsheets that we've given you that allow you to kind of think about how you can normalize data and cleanse data. I'm not going to say that this is the the best way of cleansing your data or anything like that, but it still gives you the concepts, I think, and I think that that's a lot of times better. So what we're trying to do here is say, well, let's say people use the word PL to mean place and CO to mean company and RD to be road. And we want to convert all that so that there's just one standard. We use the word road, and that's it, and that kind of thing. And we're going to show you how to do that, and then to look for some simple duplication within Excel. The other, teammate analytics and active data have some more advanced duplication that you can see here, where it does various things like a similar difference. It does like a fuzzy, I think here you can see there's a fuzzy difference happening or fuzzy duplication in active data. And then with teammate down here, having the 3 columns for duplication testing, and it allows kind of a same different test, which is also kind of a useful thing. So anyway, these are some of the more advanced kind of duplication and cleansing options, but let's go back to Excel and just talk about a couple of data files that I'm just opening up here. Just give me a second. So this one here, I provided to you so that you could play with it a bit and look at it a bit. But what we have here is a set of address fields and address information here. And that, I've kind of, this is the actual, the address line that we've then broken up into all of these different components. And what I've done is I've taken those components and I've copied them over to another worksheet. So then that way we have, all of the components in one place. And by doing so, we've kind of done a bit of a lookup to say, well, are some of the keyword lists that are on my lookup list back here? So this is the word list of, PhD and N to North and, things like that. If when I'm looking up the data that was in this cell over here, so it's in these cells over here, as I'm looking at the data in each one of these columns to my lookup list, when do I have a match? And these are the matches. So this kind of gives you an idea of the basic information and then the lookup columns that we set up to kind of normalize that. And what this is called is normalizing data, actually saying, we're going to have an invoice number field, and it's going to be an invoice number starting with an M dash, 15-1234. But then, when you get the data, they have 1-5 in one column and 1-2-3-4 in another column and an M over here. And they may even change the name and call M, some actual name of a product. We'll call it Maximum or something like that for the product name. But something that way you then have to kind of pull out the left of that field or convert it from the maximum back to the M, but that's type of effort that I've been talking about with the functions and whatnot. I find I spend a lot of my time with given data files, and this is a way of maybe just more quickly doing that using lookups and kind of looking up to a list to say does that exist within that field, in those fields. What I then do, if you want to kind of take it to the final step, is I actually do a bit of a calculation, and I say if this is NA, then what you want to do is grab the old data that was there, so in that case 3023. But if, let me just go back here, if this is not NA, so when it goes to that west, it has something here, then you want to pull it into the final data sheet. So just by setting up a couple of sheets here and having a lookup list of data fields or actual words is a way to kind of quickly normalize your data using VLOOKUP and if statements. And I also kind of got in there that is NA function, so that way if you do a VLOOKUP to a list and it doesn't find anything, it puts an NA, and then that is NA as a way of finding that. Okay, now that I've kind of normalized my data, another thing that we can do is kind of look for simple duplication within that data. And in a lot of ways, what I've done here is kind of broken out the numbers by doing a text to column. So what you could do is kind of take this final address, and to kind of break this out, you would then go data, text to columns. It's delimited, and we want to work off of the space that's in there to kind of delimit and just go from there. So then that's how I broke that out. And then once I've broken out things by the text to column feature, I then kind of just focused on only the numbers, which was that left-hand side. And all I did was just say if B3 equals B2, so I double-click on that, B3 equals B2, yes or no, and I've sorted it high to low based on that particular number. So in the address, the numbers in the address could then be tested in this simple kind of duplication way. And we also kind of showed you in active data, but we'll just kind of show you here. Let me just kind of go back. Just go to this paid file here. Let me just kind of delete all this sort of stuff over here. And just to kind of show you, this would be either teammate or active data would kind of work this way. But what I can do is select, and I don't know if we'll have that many duplicates, but we'll say same vendor number and same invoice number and same invoice date. I can extract those duplicates. We're going to do all same. I could do different here, but I'm not. Just keep it simple and go to the finish. Now, the reason I bring up duplication testing, kind of like the normalization testing, is one thing that you want to do is just make sure that the data fields what you want to have, and are they giving you enough information that you could do kind of invoice number summaries and things of that nature. And then the duplication test is making sure that you don't have too much data from a row perspective, and that people may have duplicated things in the data. So we were looking for like same invoice number, same invoice date, and you can quickly see how those things are kind of lining up, and amount, I believe. Maybe we did. I don't think we did amount. I think we did vendor number as well, which is in here somewhere. So duplication tests work. I find if we're keeping it simple, the kind of equal if and then just looking upward is a great way to do it. And if the numbers isn't is too fuzzy of a match, like it creates too many matches for you, what you might want to do is kind of focus on a left of this field and maybe focus on like the first 8 characters within that field as kind of like a left scenario situation. All right, so I'm just going to continue on just a little bit more here. So I think, regardless, in doing duplication testing, looking at the data, trying to validate it, kind of normalize it a little bit better, I think one of the main complaints that you get is that a lot of the reports lead to false positives. So when you do run your final reports, you have tons of duplicates, and it might be something where you just didn't pull out the voided transactions, for example. We talked about kind of matching on sort of the first 10 characters of a name to make it more fuzzy, but then that leads to a lot of false positives. I think running the system in a more continuous fashion, or getting the data a few times and getting through it, is a way of definitely learning more about the system and just being able to do it more continuously and learn more as time goes on. But what I find is after every audit, we think about the 20 things that we could have added or changed about the data to make it better. So I think as sort of a concluding point on validating data and such, I think it's the whole goal here is to kind of get a complete and accurate data set and to reduce false positive in the reports as much as possible, and that should really be kind of like a ringing truth as you go through this process. So I wanted to go to our next polling question here. And I hope I can read this right here. So what function is used to help convert address values to a known table, like that lookup list table that we had before? Is it VLOOKUP, clean, ASB, or dupes? And again, good time to ask some questions. We're kind of closing out. We have just a few more things to talk about in automating the data load and things to think about in setting up a data mart. But a lot of the more technical talk we've gotten through today. And I see most of you have voted here. We'll just keep that open for just a little bit longer. Actually signing into a video as we're chatting here, just so I can kind of quickly show you a video in the show. And most of you voted. We'll just keep that open just for a little bit longer. And I will close that poll and share it with everybody. And sorry, folks, I'm just signing into another screen here. So what function is used to look up into another table, and that is the VLOOKUP. The clean was more to get rid of certain unwanted characters or special characters in the data. And hopefully that'll work. Let me just hide this. And what I wanted to kind of, we'll get to this actually in a second here, but I wanted to sign into that so that we have that ready and waiting. Okay, so automating the data load. Okay, so sorry, continuing on here, the data mart concept of building a bit of an audit data mart, I think, is a really useful thing, and thinking about kind of getting your data in a more consistent fashion, probably even maybe once a year at the beginning of the year for the previous year, and asking variety of groups of people for accounts payable, general ledger data. I would almost make it like a standard thing. The more that you can do this, the more that I think you can predict with data going forward, but also kind of detect what might have happened in the past. What I find, though, is that automation really should help out here a lot in pulling the extracts for you, and hopefully even in normalizing the data and all of that. So a lot of this process becomes a hard process the first time through, but every other time through, hopefully it can be automated. To that end, I had some macros here. This is based on audit software videos. We'd come up with a few videos around kind of setting up your own macros, and one of the macros in here was kind of the basics and data import into Excel and macro buttons, and without really going into depths of this video, I didn't want to spend too much time on that, but I did want to kind of show you as quickly as I can that a macro can be utilized, and I'll just kind of drag to here. I'll just get rid of that. So what the macro does, and just by using some VBA coding, which again is talked about more in this video, it actually brings together multiple files at once, and there is some effort that has to go into the VBA coding, which is talked about in the video, but all of these videos are up on auditsoftwarevideos.com, and it's a free website. You just have to kind of sign up or register just for the free videos, but once you've done that, you can watch as much as you'd like, and this walks through this exact thing of basically bringing in multiple files and having it kind of import the file a certain way with certain formatting to every field, things like text and general and all that all set up, and excuse me, and what Tracy at Mr. Excel is kind of doing here is actually kind of editing, where is the data going to look, and then, or where's the macro going to look, and what she did here was kind of set it up where you just kind of type in the file name and type in where is the file, and the macro will kind of take over from there and import that data in under that same format. What also then happened was there was a bit of a copy and pasting that happened so that multiple files could be added on top of one another, and that's something where again she kind of walked through in another video on this in this webinar that we did, where it was called moving data around, and that was something where that was kind of the next step in the macros. But I show this to you because these are pretty, that's like an 8-minute training module. And just going to the moving data around, it's another 8 minutes or so. It's pretty quick in order to go through some of this. And again, I think macros is sort of outside of our discussion for today, but I did want to at least kind of touch on it and say that what you're able to do with macros is automate the time-consuming process of doing this data. And Tracy, this is her information, which I wanted to post to you as well because she really helped me with a lot of the macro stuff that we've done. So, I then kind of get into some of the final thoughts around automating your data normalization. Like I started out by saying 70% of my time is spent here, so as much as I can I script it and try to put it into ACL logic or macros, and you can do things like naming fields a certain way, which this actually is talking about the split function, which will kind of split the delimited file. We talked about delimited files. The split command in ACL will actually will kind of split the fields up for you automatically, and you can define that. So like instead of it being a delimited kind of import, it now becomes more of like a fixed import because you're telling it, you know, what to do where and when and all of that. This was just an example of how we utilized some documentation around automated data validation and just kind of, you know, noting, say, some of the tables that are things are coming from and the field names they're coming from, but then that in ACL logic, which is down below, and you know it's a little cryptic because it's sort of script code, but what this did was it calculated each one of those fields for you, so that you're able to, you know, you're basically able to fix what those field names are in ACL or whatever product, be it Excel or ACL that you're using here, and by fixing it, that way going forward, any sort of macros you use or any sort of scripting you use, you know that that's the field name that you're utilizing. So you know, I do think it makes a lot of sense to automate as much as you can the data normalization. It's a little beyond, you know, today's class to really go into depths on how to do that, but I do feel that like the macros videos that I showed you, those two that are about 15 minutes in total, will start you down this road of doing such things. And I find VBA code is a little cryptic to work with, but it is something that you can learn. And for some of the simple things that you're doing, like just importing a file or what have you, it actually works pretty well. It doesn't require a lot of lines of code. So things to think about. So you know, with that, I had this final slide in here which kind of talked about you know, making a validation script in a few minutes in ACL, and in one of the past ACL classes, which, you know, many of which are out on auditsoftwarevideos.com that you can take a look at, we walk through and how in 3 minutes you could build a script in ACL, and it would not only do the normalization, but would also validate some of the data by running statistics and stratifying and aging the data itself. So, okay, well, with that, I wanted to kind of note this is a really good time for any final questions. We'll put up the final polling question in just a couple minutes, but just if you do have any questions, though, now's a good time. I do see some. Yeah, and I, you know, one question that came in, is there a specific link where you can actually look into the Excel functionalities? Yeah, Jim had posted one, excelfunctions.net, Excel functions, and it goes through a variety of functions there. I find, and just you kind of going here, one thought for you. Let me just open up a couple of websites quickly here. In Audit Software Videos, we do have a whole section in Excel and working with the different functions. We also have, you know, graphs and macros and all that, but just highlighting out a little bit here, sorry. So we have kind of some of the if functions, some of the macro work that we've done, some of the other named ranges, setting up a named range. So that's a starting point. The other place that I've gone a lot to is MrExcel.com. And I know I work with Tracy, who works with them, and they have a lot out here, but one of the things that they have is, not the blog, sorry. He has a message board, which I believe you have to sign up for to post, but I mean, I want to say millions of posts that are out here. I mean, we have 700, yeah, here's 3.8 million posts that are out there. So Mr. Excel is quite good. There's a lot of folders and questions, and I just think searching that allows you to kind of get to a lot of the answers that you want. So I'm going to just launching the final polling question here, just to kind of check attendance. I did a pretty good. I don't know how this is in the slides. We didn't spend a lot on it, but for what is the character number for a tab? Is it 2, 3, 4, or 9? and it is in the slides just a little bit back, but we were talking about the split command and in ACL, and that's where I use this particular character function. So if you could put that in there. Again, any questions you have, feel free to post them. We've gotten through everything that you've had so far. Most of you have voted so far, and we just have some kind of closing announcements for today's session after the polling question. Almost all of you have voted, so we just have just a couple. We'll keep it open another 20 seconds or so just to get everyone else. There we go. Let me close that. And number 9 is the correct answer. 2 it was not, but I didn't go through that as well, so shame on me on that one. But anyway, we're continuing back here to our course calendar for the year. Did want to note that we have 13 courses. This is one of them for the Minute to Analytics program. Kind of broke it out into a few different types. I'm a big believer in kind of having your whole group train on this. I think it's a great way to train, really inexpensive way to get CPE credits. But I think it's also just kind of getting together and talking more about analytics, and I think that is something that we're really trying to push more. Let me just kind of bring that slide up there. Sorry about that. And we have started courses in February 2015, although we do have many courses that are running, and actually like the subscriptions that we have for individuals. So if you're just one person, or if you're a group and want to do it as your entire department, I believe by the April 29th, I think you could sign up by, and you'd still be able to kind of take part in all the courses in 2015, and we are going to hope get some courses lined up for 2016 to kind of continue that. So definitely take a look at that, and hopefully we'll see more of these courses. I've highlighted in bold on this next slide the courses that are related to the Minutes to Analytics training and subscription, but there are other webinars Jim and AuditNet are putting on with IDEA, with other sponsored webinars that happen as well. Fraud Resource Net, also some webinars as well that are all kind of in there. And we noted a lot being planned for 16, but really just in the next month or so, we're going through general ledger, visualization, just taking a look, in kind of analyzing from a keyword point of view, from a textual analytic point of view, and then the revenue cycle. So a lot of different types of things happening, and more of some of the practical sessions happening in the next few months here. Couple of analytic offers here. We do have out on Audit Software Videos an entire video for free, a webinar out there on our December 3rd textual analytics webinar. Over 250 people attended, based on some data files that were based on the survey of I believe over 500 people, and those data files are for sale. They're they're $79, and it gives you, if you're ever doing any sort of keyword auditing type techniques, it basically gives you 2,000 word phrases to start with, and it's based on all this research that's been done through AuditNet, so it's really helpful. The next set of research that I have on textual analytics, you'll have to kind of email me about, and if you're interested. But we're trying to summarize words in company data files, so you'd actually have to do a summary of your own words and provide. But if you're interested in that, feel free to give me a call or email me, and happy to do that. I know Jim has a couple of surveys out on AuditNet right now, so a lot of sharing, a lot of surveys happening. Many of you may have taken the survey to come to today's session, but we have the second annual State of Technology Used by Auditors, and then also who's training your auditors, which might be closed by now, so it may not be open. But the State of Technology Used by Auditors, hundreds of people have filled it out. And Jim, I didn't know if you had a few words on what you've been doing and some of the surveys.
Yeah, well, we've still got the, thanks, Rich. We've still got the second annual State of Technology by Auditors survey is open. We've had over 350 people respond to that, and we're looking for, additional people. So if you want to share that link with those in your network, that would really be appreciated. We're trying to get the maximum return. We've actually closed the Who's Training Your Auditor, and we're basically writing up the report right now and summarizing that, so that will be out in the next newsletter. Rich, I don't know if you want to mention to those people that are joining us today, just have signed up for today's webinar, but the benefits of signing up for the group webinars is something that you might want to go over with them, because they get not only the webinars, but they also get some consulting time with you, as well as some additional benefits. I think we've got an offer with an iTunes, $25 iTunes card that goes to those that sign up for these package sessions.
Yes, and I think, and for my point of view, I'm happy to spend a couple of hours with each of the groups and in kind of planning out a year for them and really kind of using Excel as a basis for analytics. Again, I believe there's even an AuditNet subscription, one of the types of subscriptions that gets thrown in.
Right, exactly.
So yeah, a lot of benefits to joining. I think the main benefit is getting your whole team to just talk about analytics, bi-monthly or every couple of weeks. But yeah, we do throw in a lot of freebies as well to try to make it worth your while.
Yeah, what Rich is proposing here is basically an ongoing discussion on using data analytics within your organization. If you've come to today's session and you don't take away the stuff that Rich has shared with you and put it to use right away, chances are it's not going to be very useful. The key benefit to data analytics is putting what you've learned to use. And if you need to talk to others within your organization, talk to them. If you can't explain it to them, I'm sure that Rich would be happy to to set up a session. We could even do something with a a group meeting through GoToMeeting, where you could have either key personnel in the audit department that that get together, or even people from outside the audit department that really may not understand the benefits of data analytics and how you can apply it. But basically what Rich and I are trying to do here, and the other people that are involved in this, is to broaden the scope of what's being done as far as data analytics. Data analytics, I'm sure Rich will will back me up on this, but it's been around for more than 20 years. But still, there's a lot of audit functions that aren't using data analytics and aren't using it effectively and continuously and embedding it into their audit process, and that's what we're trying to push here.
Yeah, no, thanks, Jim. I mean, I think agreed. I'm trying to show you some of the pricing pages, and you can get all of this out on AuditNet. And clicking on the training tab is probably the easiest way to kind of get a lot of info. But we have a really wide range of classes that we've set out into this training, so that when you go here, it's not only practical sessions that go through probably every audit area that you'd have, but also going into all the different types of more general type classes like visualization or pivot tables or textual analytics. And yeah, hopefully, I mean, with today's session, we definitely went through a lot of content quickly, but I tried my best to really think about all the things that I really use, and that's from an Excel point of view, and that's kind of where I've found I've been spending a lot more time and trying in the courses to kind of get out there as many of those difficult things that go wrong kind of put into the slides up front, so that way you know when you do get a PDF file and you go, what do we do? The slides kind of talk to it to some extent, or Unicode or whatever crazy data that they throw at you.
Yeah, and Rich has done a lot of live sessions as well. So if you're IIA chapter, or you've got a group within your organization that wants a session, Rich can schedule those based on his fee schedule. But Rich is I've sat in on a number of Rich's presentations, and Rich is, he's not only a great presenter and has a great knowledge of data analytics, but he is an amateur magician, so he will
That's right.
wow you with magic tricks as well. So
Yep,
he can
yep.
not only do tricks with data, but also he can do magic tricks. So.
Yep, thanks for that. Yeah, thanks,
Yeah.
Jim.
All right. Well, listen, we want to get out of here on time, and we know that you have other things to occupy your day. So we want to wish you a good day, and look forward to you coming back again to our webinars coming up next month, and those will be available, and we will be sending out promotions for those as well. So again, thank you, Rich, for a great session, and thank you with your great questions today, everyone, and have a great day.